Y'all are all doing amazing work in your respective field. I am going to consume as much content as I can from both of you online. I love it. I feel like I'm in the presence of royalty. I need to get some social media tips. We need to get some social media tips.
We were discussing this earlier. There's an age divide.
Yeah. We need to get,
We are not in our 20s.
I can't do no small talk. No small talk. I'm not with the small talk. Can't be with the small talk.
So it's hard to have a healthy relationship with sex and sexual health when you grow up in a house, maybe a culture or a country where no one ever willingly at least talks about it, right? It becomes this massive taboo that no one wants to touch. And the problem is that, in my experience at least, this leaves young people and people in general in our country very, very vulnerable. Now, to put it into perspective, I'm going to start this conversation off with just a little bit of stats. I don't want to overmath you, but the estimated overall HIV prevalence rate in South Africa is approximately 13.9% among the South African population. Now, the total number of people living with HIV is estimated at approximately 8.45 million people, and this was in 2022. Now, for adults, aged 15 to 49, an estimated 19.6%, so almost 20% of the population, is HIV positive. Now, seeing as it is Youth Month in June, at the end of May, we celebrated International Day of Action for Women's Health. This seems like the perfect time to have an open and honest conversation about sexual health and HIV. And so I would like to introduce you to my esteemed guests that I've got in studio with me. I've got Goitsemang over here, who is a popular Tik Toker with almost 500,000 followers. Oh my goodness, you're so close to 500,000. It's insane, right? Mm-hmm. Your content focuses on humor and things that are like very authentic to a South African audience. And you also happen to be a medical student at Wits as well. Mm-hmm. So we're doing that content creation, but we're also popping off academia as well. That is insane. What a thing to juggle. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for hosting me.
Thank you. And then we've got Andiswa, which is aka Call Me Tandolwetu on social media. You're an HIV advocate and TikToker, living with HIV for most of your life, and you use your social media platform to educate and raise awareness about living with HIV. You've got a low viral load. We'll explain that a little bit later on, but it means that you are undetectable. So you recently, I was told this, apparently have taken to TikTok to educate about this, and some of your content has gone viral with over 1 million views on some of the videos. That is insane. I feel like I'm in the presence of royalty. I need to get some social media tips. We need to get some social media tips.
We were discussing this earlier. There's an age divide.
Yeah. We need to get,
We are not in our 20s.
No. So, and then we've got Dr. Donny as well, who is a medical doctor in Johannesburg, as well as being a positivity activist. I love that title as well. You're going to be able to help us with a little bit more of like the technical parts of this conversation as well, when it comes to the medical side of things. So let's start off with a question, I think, to the table. Why do you think sexual health and HIV is something that is so clearly an issue? It's clearly an issue in South Africa. I think we all know this, but it's so taboo to the point where we almost never talk about it. And people still think it's something to be ashamed of. And I say we never talk about it. I'm including myself in this. I can't remember the last time I had a conversation with my friends, and we talk about everything. So like my friends and I, we're like no holds barred. We're having nasty conversations. I don't want to shame my friends or anything like that. But we are talking about literally everything. But the one thing we don't talk about are STDs necessarily. We'll talk about sexual health, and we'll talk about sexual wellness and mental health, especially surrounding sex and sexual health. But we very rarely talk about STDs or even HIV and that kind of stuff. So why do you think it is such a taboo subject in South Africa? I think I'll start with Dr. Donny. I think you've got a lot of experience.
The oldest one. No, I think I remember growing up in a culture where like we never spoke about sex. My parents never mentioned it at all. I think it's a culture thing, right? You never spoke about it. And I think South Africa's got a very conservative culture when it comes to sex and sexual health. Even when you talk to your friends about it, it's like a very surface level thing of like, I promote sexual health, I use a condom, I'm faithful. That's it. That's where the conversation stops. And I think chatting to my younger colleagues here, they're definitely more open about it. And I think social media times have changed and the conversation has changed. And I think it's needed to change as well.
And you, I was going to say,
adding on what Dr. Donny said, I think it goes back to culture, as you said, that we grow up in families where sex is never mentioned. Because now if I start talking to my parents and say, oh, how do I use condoms? automatically it's me telling my mother that I'm having sex.
Yeah.
You
That
know?
gave me
Goosebumps.
my entire body took a screenshot. I was like, when you said talk to your parents about it, I was
Yeah.
like, hey.
That is.
So yeah, that happens a lot. But I think now the conversation is slowly changing. Although
Yeah.
it's slowly changing, but we really like go in depth with the conversation. We just have a surface level conversation about you know, sexual health, you know, condomize, but it's never that deep. Why should I condomize? Why
Yeah.
should I do this and that?
Yeah.
So yeah.
And for you and your friends?
Okay. It's always weird that we are shy away from the thing that most people are, you know, doing.
Engaging in, yeah.
So for me, it's like, why? And at the same, like, I'm just so, at the same time, I think the reason why everyone is like shy to talk about it, at the same time, we, like, from my age group, we learn more of what to do from the streets or the talk
Yes.
around, which is so
100%.
stupid. It's
Or
like
the
stupid.
internet even,
Yeah.
which is a terrible place.
It's very terrible.
Sometimes it can be great. There's a lot of resources and education. But if you find yourself in the wrong corner of the internet, you are going to get terrible advice. Terrible advice.
Because for most people, they know that it only stops with testing for HIV. I'm like, there's other deadly things than HIV. The fact that some even consider, some of them literally shy away. Their faces, I rather die than to know, which is more dangerous.
More dangerous. Yeah.
Which is more dangerous. I'm just like, what do you mean you're rather? That's what. It's a long way, but the conversations are starting.
Yeah, the
But
conversations will start.
I also think we can't avoid the conversations anymore. I think I read an interesting stat last week that by the age of 11, 70% of people by the age of 11 have watched pornography on their phone. So they've been exposed to sex already.
Yeah.
So now
Yeah.
you can't avoid these conversations because 11-year-olds most probably know more about sex than I do at 41, right? They're more exposed to it. They see more of it on the internet, on social media. As an older person or as a mentor, as a guardian, as a parent, you need to talk to them about it. Like, they're seeing it on the internet. You're right. As you said, you could get bad advice. And I think that's why we're here today, to try and give some
Yeah.
good
Good
advice, right?
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
healthy
Yeah.
conversation as well. And to maybe inspire you to have healthy conversations with your friends
Yeah.
and family if you're brave enough. That might take me a little bit. Anyway, it's interesting that we all sat around this table though, and we're all from different cultures. I think in South Africa, we're very blessed to live in a country where we do have so many different people with different cultures. But one thing that I can say is that our cultures agree on is the secrecy around sex and not speaking to your parents about it, because I can identify with
And
that
you
as
only
well.
do it after marriage,
Yeah.
right? That's
After
kind
marriage.
of,
Yeah, 100%.
It doesn't happen during the day. It happens in the dark after you're married.
And you know what's surprising? It's now acceptable when you're pregnant, like, because pregnancy initially means you're doing it.
Yes.
So it's now the acceptable part. It's
Yes.
very funny. Actually.
It is weird because we almost like deny what you had to do to get pregnant.
Yeah.
We love the pregnancy, we love the baby, but we're denying what you did to
What you
get,
did before.
to get the baby.
Even I think with marriage, it's not that deep. It's when are you having a baby?
Yes,
You know,
yes.
Like, where did we get here?
That's the sex conversation that we
Yeah.
had. When are you having a baby? It's never, do you guys condomize? Do you guys
Yeah.
take PrEP?
Yes.
Those kind of conversations, we barely have them, I think.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt,
No, no,
Stephanie.
of
I think I see a lot of patients in this area, which is quite cosmopolitan, and also the whole age group. I mean, we have this conversation with patients in a marriage that one has to condomize, and they condomize, they still check for STDs, like. In the dungeons of my consulting room is where these heavy conversations happen, and I wish it would just be taken out, dare I say, to the streets where we can have these more open and honest conversations out there.
That makes sense. So you mentioned PrEP. So I'm going to address this to you, Dr. Donny. In your opinion, is the medication needed to help with HIV known about enough in general in South Africa, in our general population? And secondarily, is it readily available enough for those who do know about it?
Yes.
So do we know about it, A, and B, is it known about how we can get it, you know?
So do we know enough about it? No, categorically not.
Okay.
Very few people know about pre-exposure prophylaxis. I'm going to say a very small. And then certain groups know about it. Like, I have a lot of gay patients in Melville. They know a lot about PrEP. Straight people don't. They don't know that that's available at all. Like, I'm like, there is a magic potion that you can take that can prevent you from getting HIV. And they're like, never heard of this before.
That is wild.
Is it readily available?
Yeah.
Yes, it is. And I know in the
Yeah.
private sector, I know it's easily available. You work in the government sector. You'd maybe know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it is readily available. Earlier on, I went live on TikTok.
Okay.
And then we were talking about PrEP, and someone said, oh no, with PrEP, you don't need to take it all the time. You just need to take it before you have sex.
Yes.
They
is-
do that.
Yes.
Yes.
People just take PrEP on the day and they go to have sex. So I think it's readily available, but do we think people have enough information about it?
Education.
No.
So just to elaborate a little bit more technically, there is something called on-demand PrEP now,
Okay,
where
interesting.
you don't have to take it every day. New studies have come out to show that you take it before and a couple of days afterwards.
But you just need to make sure you're taking the right thing, and you've got guidance from some sort of a medical professional.
Which I also like. It's also weird talking to patients because then sex becomes a very planned event, right? Like, so you need to take it at such and such a time to make it work. So you almost got like a diary date in your mind, which is, I don't know, the romance is a little bit, you're scheduling that, but that is an availability that you do have on demand.
On demand.
The alternative is you take it every day and then go for regular blood checkups and just to make sure that.
Of course. And then asking the two of you, especially, I know for myself in LO, I went to a very liberal school in Cape Town. We were very lucky. I had a very comprehensive sex education at school. I was one of, I think, a few people who had a comprehensive sex education at school. We were given condoms even at school, and that might be controversial to say, but we had readily available condoms for us, and it was an all-girls school even, and so the conversations were very open, very honest about sex. But I still found myself wholly unprepared when I got to varsity and realized that we spoke about sex, and we spoke about consent and the mental health around sex and what the act looks like, and condomizing and all the different kinds of prophylaxis and all of that kind of stuff. But we never were really given a reason, I think, that I understood why. I knew, I was like, pregnancy was obviously something that we all wanted to avoid. But I don't know if it was just my naivety or maybe just the way we spoke about it. I didn't think that HIV was something that was going to affect me. I got to varsity and I was like, oh, like it's a thing from the olden days. Like, we're not, they were talking about it back in the day, like in the 90s and the 80s. Like, it's not something that affects me. We've already dealt with it. It's like not that big of a deal. And then only to realize, once I started being a little bit more involved in campus activities, I was very like politically minded, that actually HIV is something that we're still struggling with as a youth in South Africa. And we had drives at varsity as well to go and get tested, and we would go get tested together, all of our friends. And I did obviously educate myself then. But did y'all have an experience in school where you felt like you were adequately prepared for sex, like by your school teachers and in school?
No. Not at all. Not at all. Okay. For me, it was just the theory part of it. So in class, they would talk about sex.
The biological
they would talk about condoms and all those kind of stuff. But also, them mentioning sex and mentioning condoms. Remember, they're still old women talking to 18-year-olds or 15-year-olds. They still hide some information. So I think our schooling, yes, or in LO, or them teaching us about HIV, it was only the theory part, not the practical demonstrations of how to properly use a female condom, how to properly use a male condom. So all those kind of stuff. So for me, was I prepared? No. Some of the things I just got them when I got into medicine, and I'm like, this happens. So
Yeah.
How did you? I'm just like, you got theory. I never got that.
You didn't even get theory.
No, I think the last time I had like any sex conversation was grade 7 when they were showing us the different parts of a boy and a girl.
Oh, so like puberty vibes. Yeah, so like what happens.
Other than that, the whole sex talk was literally like me talking to my classmate or something. But I've always been curious about the subject. It was just interesting, like what actually happens. And in my culture, it was horrible when my mom found out I was asking questions. So it was a whole nother thing. So,
yeah. When it gets back to the parents, that's terrible. Yeah. That is.
I think with us, the reason why we had a lot of like theory, we had soul buddies. I don't know if you remember that. The group thingy where we would have posters.
It was on TV.
Say no to TB.
Really?
Yeah. So that's where we would have most HIV conversations. But outside that, in the classroom, it's just surface level. They just brush it and then they move on.
I love how we had HIV conversation. I've like maybe because I come from a very small town, the whole HIV conversation was not being held. We just saw by posters at the clinic, just But there's never been a conversation even in school.
Yeah. And that's also the issue, because like it's one thing having the conversation, it's another thing for the conversation to be open and honest and to give you all of the information, and then it's another thing to know where to go for help, right? That's another thing, because you can be educated about it from a biological perspective. You can have intensive sex education at school and then still get to varsity or still be in high school and not know where to go for help and who to talk to. You don't want to talk to your LO teacher or your guidance counselor or anything like that, because you're worried they're going to go talk to your parents. So you're kind of left alone, and you're like, you've maybe got the internet at your disposal, and you're like, where do I go to get a female condom? Like, how do I get tested for HIV? Where can I go? HIV testing near me on the internet, like that kind of stuff. So I think that's also the issue, is that the access is an issue, and knowing about the access. And I think you can speak a little bit on this, being a doctor yourself. How do we change that? How do we change the access issue and the knowledge about access?
I need to commend everyone. Like, access has definitely changed. I started medical school in 2000. Like, that's a long time ago.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So that was my first year was in 2000, right?
I was 1 year old.
Not born. At least you were
And
born.
back then, there was no access. As I moved on in medical school, I think Soul Buddies then came out.
Yeah.
But these were the dark ages of HIV and AIDS, right? I remember then doing my student intern complex, where you go and work in the hospitals. People would die of AIDS, and the stigma was... And when you'd see them with all those like fungal infections, very thin and cachectic, people would still not admit that it was HIV. They would it would totally, the stigma was really, really bad. Sure. Things have changed a lot in 20 years. So yes, access might not be the best that it is now, but we have definitely come a long, long way. I think the internet, I think social media has definitely helped. And I think kids are more, dare I use the word woke, they know where to go to get tested now. And I think back then you would never go for an HIV test ever. You'd rather, as you say, you'd rather die and suffer in silence. And I think there was also a lot of things around consent back in the early 2000s. Like, you needed to go with your parents to get an HIV test done.
What?
So we have changed a lot.
Yeah. I know that
it's definitely a better world now.
I know that kids from 12 can now freely go by their own.
But that wasn't always the case,
Yeah,
right?
it
Like, you needed to
wasn't.
be 16 at some stage. Or it was.
That's what an insane rule to have in place when it comes to something like sexual health. So can you tell us a little bit more about the testing process?
Yes.
So like, for somebody who might be a little bit nervous, a little bit scared, who's like, I don't know, I want to go get tested. What does the process look like? Is it all private? Is the information kept private? Yes. Is it shared if you are under the age of 18? Is it shared? Are the results shared with your parents? Or is it between you and your medical provider? How does it work?
So it is definitely between you and your medical provider. And I think it's a very easy process. You can go to a local clinic. You can go to your general practitioner. There are nurses on campus in terms of campus health. You go in. You'll be like, I'd like to request an HIV test. Obviously, your healthcare provider will talk you through the steps and the process. They'll be like, look, we're going to prick your finger. It's a rapid test. We'll get the results out in 15 minutes.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
And then we'll be like, would you like counseling around it? What do you know about HIV? Do you know how the disease is transmitted? So I spend a lot of time with patients just talking them through the whole viral process. And then we'll do the test, and the results are out in 15 minutes. And so it's much, much easier to do. Apparently now you can even get self-tests, right?
Yes, you can.
You can even get self-tests.
Yeah, I've seen them.
But it's still a very nerve-wracking experience to have done. I mean, I have had 6 needle stick injuries in my career. So I've poked myself with HIV needles. Not all mine. Sometimes other surgeons have done that for me. But every time I still do an HIV test now, I still get nervous. I still get anxious. I still sweat. I had one done with the Forever Wear campaign at Huge, and they're like, do you want to do one? And I was like, I remember being on post-exposure prophylaxis like 3 months ago. My wife was next to me. I was sweating. I was like, this is a lot. So I do appreciate that it is still a very scary thing.
Yeah.
But it is much easier to access this these days, and just go see. Like, campus health is a good place to start for young people, right?
And
or your local
normalize it.
clinic.
Like, find a friend.
Yeah.
Honestly, don't do it alone. This is not something you have to do alone. Get your bestie to come with you,
100%.
like, and do it with you, just as moral support. Even if they're not worried about their exposure or anything, just get a friend to come with, because I think having a buddy is like the best thing when you're feeling like that kind of nerves. Just to have somebody that you know, like, with you, like, you know,
just
holding
hold
your hand, emotionally speaking, I suppose. Is it possible to have HIV and potentially other STDs, but mostly HIV, that's what we're focusing the conversation on, and not know?
Yes. So there is still the window period, right? So if you get tested too soon, you might test negative, and then, say for example, you had exposure yesterday and you tested today and it came back negative. That's maybe not a true reflection of your status, because your body, like, most of these tests are run by what we call antibodies. So they detect antibodies. So it takes about 14 days for your body to make antibodies against the HIV virus. So you could test too soon. That's why we always recommend people to come back in 2 weeks just to test again. And then some people just live in denial. They just live in absolute denial, where they're like, nah, it won't happen to me. It happens to the people in the rural areas. It happens to different groups of people. Not I'm socially exclusive. It's not for me.
And when you mention that, if you drive around the north, compared to the South. You'll find a lot of posters on HIV in the South compared to in the North. So now you ask yourself the question that, are people in the North knowing about HIV, or do we say they are smart enough to go to get tested compared to people in the South? So that's why other people are still in denial. They'll be like, oh no, I live in Sandton.
This is not for me.
This is not for me. It's for people in the rural areas, people who are still poor, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you. Rich people believe it's a poor person's disease. This is the sort of outlook out there that it's for poor people and gay men. Those are the only people that have HIV.
The big ones, yeah.
Everyone else, no, we're fine. We've got money. We don't have HIV.
Like, it doesn't exist
Do we
in our
party
world.
do we party like rock stars on the weekends, take cocaine and have orgies 100%?
Exactly.
Well, most people are clean because they have money. They come in their Mercedes. They clean.
That's so deadly.
It's so deadly.
It's scarier if you literally don't know your status than actually
100%.
having it. Yeah.
And when we were looking at the stats a little bit earlier on, I mentioned that it's almost 20% for people between the ages of 15 and 49 in South Africa.
Crazy.
That is an insane amount of people. So if you think that you're in a community or an area you party, or because of where you party and who you party with, that you're insulated from this or isolated from it, that you exist outside of the crisis, you are sorely mistaken,
100%.
unfortunately.
100%.
And you will learn, unfortunately, the hard way.
Yeah.
So I think this comes to the conversation of, and this is a tough conversation where even I need to be honest with myself, which is, we know what we need to do in order to lessen our risk of contracting HIV, right? So you've got PrEP, you've also got condoms as well, which is the classic condomize, right? But the conversation that I would like to have, and I would like to hear from a doctor's perspective and yours as well, it's very important that I hear from younger people, is, at least for me, it's been very difficult for me to almost stand up for myself and advocate for myself in a sexual interaction with someone where I'm the one going, I would like us to use protection, and they go, I don't like that. I don't want to. And in those moments, and outside of those moments, I'm a very strong woman. I'm a strong and proud woman. I'm educated. I am, I understand all of the things. I understand the risks. But I'm in those situations, and because of the power dynamic, because of what's happening, and I mean, this is the honest truth, physiologically, women are more vulnerable, physiologically speaking. But then also societally, culturally, we are also more vulnerable because there is an unequal power dynamic at play, especially if you are in a straight relationship and there's a man in the bedroom, like a biological male in the room with me. I hate to say this, but I'm probably going to be like, oh, okay, I understand you don't like it, and feel kind of pressured in that situation. So I suppose my question is, especially to you, as a younger person, do you also feel that still exists? And it's like that pressure to, when the other person is like, no, I don't want to use protection. And they're like, I don't like the way it feels. It's not sexy for me. It, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff.
Tight.
It's as gross.
Exactly.
It doesn't fit. It doesn't feel good.
What was that line? Like you won't eat a sweet with a wrapper on?
Oh, yeah.
That is what people use.
Literally.
Crazy. On my TikTok, I had a series on 5 type of guys to avoid if you're dating. So the first one was the raw guy. It's easier and harder for me because of my HIV status. So disclosing is obviously the first thing, right?
Okay.
And then second thing comes to how we're gonna be safe. That's typically how a guy responds. Then you get those guys who just
Girl.
who will literally tell me, I don't mind getting it. I'm like, what do you mean? It's very hard because at the same time you're also vulnerable, but you have to think, okay, cool, I can't do this to myself because not only will I expose myself to more things, but also him. Those people will forever be there, but I think your sexual health plan really matters. I think I'm at a point in my life where literally, no, I'm not doing it.
I think we need to teach people the language to use in the bedroom. So again, sex education is great, and talking about sexual health is great, but these are also the conversations we need to have with our friends, where you're saying to your girlfriends, or you're saying to your friends in general, these are the sentences I say. This is how I deal with people in that scenario who don't want to use protection, and give other people the tools in the toolbox and the language to use in order to, and it sounds terrible, but to negotiate themselves out of those situations.
So earlier on TikTok again, we
Yeah.
were talking about...
I love it. I'm
so
obsessed
went
with TikTok.
live.
So I don't,
I went live and we were talking about how sometimes, so this one girl came on the panel and she was talking about how she had sex yesterday with a boyfriend, and the boyfriend in the middle of the intercourse removed the condom because he said it's not feeling Nice. And then now we're talking about how do you bring the conversation around protection during sex or before the intercourse. And then this one lady said, oh no, she all the time with her man, she would say, I'm not preventing, so I'm not using contraceptives, so I'm avoiding pregnancy, so we need to use a condom.
Yes.
Yeah.
So such phrases or sentences, other people use that. But we still have people who would still say you can't eat a sweet with a wrapper on. Condoms are not make sex less enjoyable and all those kind of stuff. But I think it's more important that we take back our sexual agency, and then all the time we tell people that I need to protect myself. It doesn't matter whether you say I should trust you. It doesn't matter whether you say you are healthy. You know your status. It's fine. I know my status. But we need to condomize all the time.
Yeah.
I agree
And from
with
a
you.
doctor's perspective?
So I think you mentioned the stats earlier that 20% of South Africans have HIV. It's a little bit more skewed with women, like 25% of women of reproductive age have HIV. And I think we can't talk about HIV without talking about another big problem in South Africa, namely GBV and sexual violence.
Yeah.
And that alludes to what you said earlier. Like, I think lots of women are unfortunately in positions where the power dynamic is so at play that they can't escape, that they're in a situation. And it's about teaching men better sexual practices, how to treat women properly. It's about talking about GBV, sexual violence. And I think if we could somehow negotiate that, we'll somehow fix this HIV problem as well. And it starts with men, right? Like, let's be honest.
agree,
Like,
yeah.
men don't want to get tested. Men don't believe they get HIV. Men are powered by testosterone, which is like, take all the risks now. Like,
Yeah,
as
I
you
hear
said
ya.
earlier,
Like you said, they
I
don't
care.
care.
I'm
I don't
in the
mind
moment.
getting it.
I don't mind getting it.
Imagine.
So I would like it's my comment section because apparently if you're HIV positive, supposed to look some type of way. So whenever they see me looking a certain way, they're like, I would risk it. That's my whole
Yeah.
comment section. I'm like, oh.
Babes. Oh my goodness.
But I think we should also talk about this. If you do end up in a situation like that where something has happened, you've now had unprotected intercourse, there's something called post-exposure prophylaxis, right? So you get pre-exposure prophylaxis, which you take every day and prevents you if you're going to have a sexual experience.
Yeah.
Post-exposure prophylaxis, if taken within 72 hours of the event, can almost guarantee that you won't get HIV. So it's a course of 30 days worth of tablets
Yeah.
that if you go to your doctor, healthcare worker, nurse, can do all of this within 72 hours, you can get onto that course of antiretrovirals.
Wow.
And in 2024 has very little. I've tried all post-exposure prophylaxis
Okay.
because of
Yeah.
needle stick injuries. It's so
Yes.
much. There's no side effects in 2024 as opposed to
amazing.
2010. So
Okay.
if you do end up in a situation where something has happened, there is a solution. There is an out for you.
Okay.
Obviously, that deals with the physical, the emotional
Yes.
things need to be unpacked as well. But there are answers.
Yeah,
100%.
on my page, we call the PEP my version of birth control.
I like that.
Oh, yes.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
Morning after pill.
Yeah,
I think
but
I saw
like-
that video.
yeah, the HIV.
So, Tano Weto, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you found out about your HIV status? If whatever you mind sharing, I don't want to, be too prying, but if you want to speak a little bit about that, and I suppose how you've managed it lifestyle-wise since knowing.
Oh, where do I start? Okay, first off, I wanted to just say that I grew up with, like I mentioned, that HIV is not really talked about. I think
Yeah.
the only reference to HIV I've ever saw was some movie referring to HIV. I was like, oh, that wouldn't happen to me. So I've been on ARVs since I was 8. I was told that it was kidney stone medication. So obviously, black household, I don't ask, man. I'm like, okay, cool.
You just get given the pill. You're
Yeah,
like, yes,
it's
ma'am.
like, I'm like, I thought it was
Cool.
really normal. I thought every child took
Yeah.
pills because
Yeah.
it was such a normal thing in my household. And then I think it was life science class where we were like comparing side effects when you have kidney stones, and I'm like, oh, these are very different than my side effects. So I'm like, okay. I got home, I researched my medication, and it just kept on showing me HIV-1, HIV-2. I was like, no way. Closed my phone. Right? I was like, it can't be me. I'm like, nope. During this time, my parents were still very much on the part that it's for kidney stones. So
Okay.
still that until I think I was at my doctor's appointment. Something kept on telling me it was not for kidney stones until I asked, and they told me at that right age. When I tell you, because at the time I'm 18, I didn't think there was an 18-year-old who's HIV positive.
Yeah.
It got worse because I was still in matric, so the whole LO topic is coming
course,
out. The whole
yeah.
typical, you get HIV from the place older men. I'm like, oh my god! I felt like everyone was pointing at me, like I'm
And
the
judging
HIV
you.
one. Yeah, because I did not know anyone, even on social media, who's my age, born with HIV. So, but with me, I was already on the content side of it, so I was like, I can't live my life in shame of something
Yeah.
like this, because I just felt like, because of the fact that, like you said, HIV was a very serious topic, like, because a lot of my family members have passed away because of HIV. So my parents really had this whole idea that I should not tell anyone, should be my secret. I think keeping it is what destroyed me more, if that makes sense. So I made a decision to come out, and I've been out ever since. So now comes the tricky part, university. Now the sex talk goes out of the way, right?
Of course.
Only thing I'm told is drink your pills. That's anything I've ever been told. Post those, drink your pills, then you're fine. I'm like, okay, when do I tell someone I have it? What do I do to make sure this person doesn't get it? So it was a learning like process.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, because disclosing to 19-year-old boys is not ideally the...
That's not a conversation.
Yeah, that's not
that's a difficult conversation to navigate. As a 19-year-old yourself, that's already a difficult conversation for people who are older and who have been through all of these relationships and are incredibly emotionally mature. Imagine asking somebody fresh out of matric to have that open and honest conversation, mature conversation. Sure.
It's even me disclosing. So telling a 19-year-old, like, they're like, what happens now? Are you what's HIV? I'm like, what do you...
And even others would go on to say, where did you get it?
Oh, they're like, first impression is, how many people have you been with? I'm like, oh my God.
No, that's not.
So having to accept that is fine. Someone, just because they don't like those doesn't mean. So having to just gather yourself that there's a lot of rejections coming, and that's okay. So yeah.
So you have a low viral load as well, which means that your HIV is undetectable. Can you explain what viral load means in like your language, and then we can ask Dr. Donny to like fill in from like a medical perspective, but from what you understand from like how you've had it explained to you and how you understand it in like, you know, your language.
So because of the fact that I always went with my mother to the doctor's place, I think the doctor didn't find the need to explain these things to me. Like, I had to sit down and research what's a CD4 count, what's a viral load, because I genuinely didn't understand what was going on. So from what I know, a viral load is the amount of virus in your body. Then CD4 count is the amount of white cells. So it's been very tricky for me to be undetectable, because you grow up your whole life just drinking pills, not being very consistent in it. So that's why it delayed me. And then when I started being consistent, I was undetectable, meaning the amounts of virus in my body got suppressed. The hub.
So that's 100% in your oral exam.
There you go. Well done.
So there's a new catchphrase that goes, undetectable viral load is the new HIV negative. That's kind of
cool.
So to try and make this as simple as possible. So you're right. The CD4 count measures your body's immunity to fight the infection, and the viral load is how many active virus particles are in your bloodstream, measured in milliliters per. It's a very technical thing. So that means if you've got an undetectable viral load, you can't transmit HIV to someone else. So this is how we navigate couples that have it, that want to have kids and babies. The moment they have an undetectable viral load, we go, you can't transmit the virus. But then the next question is, but then why do I still test positive on an HIV test? Because as we said earlier, because you measure antibodies, so that you measure your body's response, so that will always be positive.
Of course.
But you can't transmit the virus to someone else. And this is why compliance when taking medication is so important. As you said, I suppose teenagers across all diseases are rebellious, from diabetes to anything. They won't take their meds for anything.
ADHD even. Imagine being a 7-year-old and you have to take an ADHD med every single day.
I went on strike at some point.
They
were like,
I don't like my parents. I'm not injecting insulin. But so now, like, that's the aim, to get people to a good, undetectable viral load, and then life becomes really good.
Yeah. So what, if any, lifestyle changes have you made, I suppose, now that you're on your own, you're at varsity, or you're away from home, you're out of the small town, and you've got to take your own pills. You don't have your parents going, take your medicine every day. So what lifestyle changes have you had to make, or have you made none, really?
Okay, realistic, right? If I'm going out to the club or whatever, because it's a very big thing from what I know, not to mix ARVs and alcohol.
100%.
So it's a whole, if we go to the club and I have to drink my pills directly at 10 and I'm there 9:30, I don't mind going to the bathroom actually checking in, because I just don't want to default. That's just one of my things. Or it's a whole joke, meaning your partner taking their pills in the bathroom because they don't want to know. So it's like, if I'm in a situation where I have to, I will, if it means me having to leave. So that managing that time that I always have to have my pills. What else?
Like dietary wise, are you like, do you go to gym? I don't know if that kind of stuff even helps really, but like
there's different types of HIV people.
okay.
There's some very serious one who believe your immune system is weaker than others, which is to the point where they do not drink or smoke.
Okay.
That's them.
You're still living your life, baby.
I'm just like, it's not that deep, but okay. I guess it goes along from what my doctor told me, that the weight you gain on ARVs is the weight you could have been.
Okay.
So if it's concerning people hit the gym, I'm just really living my life. I think that's the only manageable thing I had to do, just finding a way in my busy life. How do I still put in my pills, and how do I guess, disclose? That's another. Disclosing needs a whole book.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah,
Those kinds of conversations. And not just about HIV, about any
Everything,
number
actually.
of the STDs,
Yeah,
honestly.
yeah.
I also am neurodivergent, and I even struggle, and that's not even something sex related, but it is still technically sex related because it does affect my relationship with sex as an act. And I also struggle on like when to disclose to people the fact that I'm autistic, because I sometimes meet people for the first time and they can make certain assumptions about me and who I am because of the way I act or because of the way I come across. And I'm like struggling even now as an adult to try and figure out, when do I tell people actually that I'm autistic, because like maybe it might help them understand some of the context for why I behave the way I do, or why I speak the way I do, why I act the way I do. So just disclosing a status of any kind, whether it be a mental health status, a physical status, anything that you feel like you need to tell somebody else so that they have context as to who you are and why you are, how you are, is a difficult conversation to have. And I think we're still learning as a society, as not even just as a country, not even just as South Africa, as a globe, we're still discovering how to have those conversations, because there's still difficult conversations to have. Goitse, now I've got a question for you.
Yes.
You spend a lot of time on social media. You're a content creator, so you're speaking a lot to young people, especially on TikTok as well.
Yes.
So now you spoke about the fact that the only reference you had to HIV in the past was a movie, or like maybe a TV series or something like that. Do you, in your opinion, think that making movies and incorporating HIV and those kinds of things into TV series and movies that are targeted towards young people, do you think that is something that could be done more in South Africa and could potentially help the way we speak about HIV and the fact that it is so taboo? If we have movies and TV series, we can see characters and we can go, oh, that person is living a normal life. They're going out on the weekends and they're having fun with their friends and they're still engaging in sex and all these kinds of things responsibly. They take a pill every day, but it's not that big of a deal. Like, it's not that deep, like you said. Do you think seeing that in entertainment would have any effect on us culturally?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think if we can have stories and change the narrative of how they tell HIV stories.
Yeah.
Because now, yes, we still have TV shows and series. The typical HIV patient or the typical HIV individual or character will be the one with like the very thin,
Yes, and like
constantly
in the rural
sick
area.
in
Yeah,
the
like
rural
constantly
area.
dying
We want to see the
in the
investment
hospital
bankers, right?
bed.
We want to see a CEO running.
Yeah, exactly.
We want to see Tando walking around
Yes,
the street.
exactly.
So if we can have
Exactly.
some people that we can relate to, and stories that tell people like stories that tell, or TV shows that tell stories that people who live
Relate
like
to,
HIV that we can relate to, like Tando, then it can work. But the only issue the other thing is telling those stories on TV or on social media and TV might also reach a wider audience.
Yes.
I believe a wider audience.
Of
But
course.
also remember, we're still in those families where if now we're still talking about sex,
They'll
if
switch
now we're
off the
still talking
TV.
about HIV, we're switching the TV off.
Yeah.
Because even now, I love what you said in your story where you said your parents didn't tell you until you were of a certain age and when you started questioning. Even now, we still have parents who say to their kids, no, you're taking pills for meningitis. It's
Even
meningitis.
now, yeah.
And then a child only knows
Stigma,
about
yeah.
HIV when they come across the pills in the textbook to say, no, this looks like my container, but now it's for HIV people. So if we can have such stories on TV and social media, I think we can reach a wider audience and it can be a great way of spreading awareness and challenging stigma.
Yeah, 100%. And then it's a lack of information, right? It's a lack of education, but it's also a lack of representation. I think that's also what you were touching on as well, is that that you didn't see people who were just young and living their lives with HIV as a thing. And I think like those older people you're talking about, especially in the rural areas and more conservative cultures in South Africa, and there are many of them. I come from a relatively conservative family myself as well. We didn't speak about sex. I didn't speak about sex at home, not at all. Still to this day, I wouldn't even dare speaking about sex to either of my parents. That is absolutely like insane to me to comprehend. I can't imagine a world where I'm comfortable sitting on a couch speaking to my parents about that. And that's insane to say. It's 2024 and we're still feeling these things. How, as a society, do we move forward? And like, it's one thing talking to the youth, but it's a whole other thing talking to the older generation to say to them, you're not doing your kids any favors by lying to them and telling them, oh, it's kidney stone medication, oh, it's meningitis medication, oh, it's malaria pills or whatever, whatever lie they make up or whatever. You're not doing that kid any favors. You're actually taking resources away from them. You know, if you had been told at 8, you could have spent that time getting your head around it, mentally at least. And also it would have been normalized not only for you, but then for your friends as well, for everyone else. And how do we have those conversations with young people and old people in a way that feels respectful of their beliefs, but also still challenges their beliefs? And I think that's what we're struggling with, is that like we want to be respectful. We don't want to like make anyone feel defensive about the subject. That's not what we want at all. We want to come from an open and honest and sincere place. But how do we do it in a way where the message is received positively?
I think the correct language. I think we spoke about it like earlier. Like we grew up in a generation where the only way to teach people things was out of fear. Like if you do this, you'll die. Like it was like cause and effect. So I think we need to change our vocabulary. And this is what this Forever Winner campaign is really doing well. Is like speaking to youth and maybe to adults and older people as well at a language they can understand that's more supportive and not punitive.
Yes, and not like accusatory.
Exactly.
Not like naughty. You're naughty.
Ghana, I mean, I may have mentioned this a few times. I'm in my 40s, so my friends now have kids that are 15, 14 years old.
Yeah.
But now I don't have kids myself, but like they now have all of a sudden become very protective of their children and be like, it's not for my kids. I'm not going to have this discussion. I'm going to go right back to that denial that I grew up in. I just want to appeal to the people of our age in their 40s that like we have so much more education and tools at our hands to help our kids, and we should not make it accusatory, as you said, like you have HIV because you're a bad person or because you've made bad decisions. We should change that narrative and that language and be more supportive, and I think that will change
I also think
outlooks.
I also think there's like an incorrect idea that if you talk to young people, like very young, I'm saying 8, 9, 10, you said 11 a little bit earlier on. Most have already seen porn by 11. But the concern is that if you speak to an 8, 9, 10-year-old about sex and sexual wellness and sexual health, that it's going to encourage them somehow to have sex. And I think that's what we need to understand, is there is a difference between educating and encouraging. We're not saying talk to young people and encourage them to go and you know, I suppose do sexual behaviors or whatever. We're talking from a place of education. And the best, I suppose, cure for this is preventative. But where you speak to them from an age before they start engaging in sexual activity.
I think looking at it, saying that talking about HIV or sex education encourages you, your physiology at 13 is going to encourage you.
It's always encouraged you to have sex.
Your DNA is wired to at 13 years old do it.
Puberty hits you and you're just like, what?
Irrespective of what your parents say. So I think the drive and desire is always going to be there. That's what we are as humans. You'll always have a sexual desire. We can't curb that at 13. We might as well just educate you to make the right decisions.
Yeah, 100%. So despite the high numbers of people that are living with HIV currently in South Africa and around the world, actually, the amount of HIV-related deaths, now this is interesting, has more than halved in Africa specifically over the last decade or so. So in the last 10 years, the amount of HIV-related deaths has halved, which is amazing. Is this because treatment is becoming more accessible? Is this because medicine has...
Drugs work.
Yeah, drugs have changed over the last 10 years and they're so much better than they were.
I can't remember the guy's name. He was on TV a long time ago. He had a white t-shirt with a purple box. He was like a big HIV activist in the early 2000s.
It's a young boy.
Was it right?
No.
I can't remember his name, but he was on TV a lot.
Okay.
Back then, HIV drugs were horrible. And you speak to people in the 70s, like people were dying of side effects of HIV medication.
Goodness.
I think that there's a Versace movie on Netflix that speaks to that, like how bad the side effects were. HIV medication today in 2024 is a breeze. The meds are working. You live a healthy, normal life. And I think we should not be scared of it anymore. I think it's such a easy, treatable, chronic condition.
Yeah.
And that's why the deaths have halved, because the
Yes.
beds are working well.
Yeah, that's why I was asking. Is it
Yeah.
an education thing? Is it that, what is it? Or is it the meds? The meds are
The
working.
workers are working.
The
The
meds and the education. Maybe.
And
Yeah,
the
yeah,
I think we need to give a little bit of props to education
To
as
education,
well
yeah.
on this.
Because remember, I was still young at the time.
Oh, you're telling.
The Mantom Musimang something, that era
The
where
Thabo Mbeki
Thabo Mbeki
government.
era
Okay.
where
Yeah.
people were denied ARVs. They were
Yes.
like, no.
And he was the activist that would fight for this outside
Yes.
Parliament
Really?
and
Yes.
strike and do all these
Okay,
things.
okay.
Yeah. So I think now, because now people are open
Mm-hmm.
to the conversation around medication, that there's ARVs, you can take ARVs. Although we still have patients that are in denial and that they will say, no, there's no need for me to take medication.
Yeah.
But now the education around the pills and all those kind of stuff also helped lessen the number of mortalities in the country.
And we were making some really, and by we I say medicine was making some really bad decisions in the early
Really?
2000s,
Okay.
right? Like
Yeah.
look at that government where like take garlic, have a shower. And I remember the
Oh, yes.
the HIV treatment regime has changed. So like you would only start someone on antiretrovirals if their CD4 was a lot like below 250. So medical aids and funders would only pay for medication once you got really sick. It was weird.
wow.
It
Wow.
was like,
so they wanted to wait for you
Yeah,
to get sick
to get
before they
sick.
would actually intervene.
But in
That's
that moment, doesn't
crazy.
your viral load increase?
yeah, your
more?
viral load.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, so we would only start treating people with a CD4 count of under 250. But then you've got like
Yeah.
other illnesses, your
Yeah.
viral loads through the
Opportunistic
ceiling.
infections.
insane.
Exactly. But then we'd wait. We'd be like, you're HIV positive, but you've got a CD4 count of 350. So you're still okay. Let's wait another 6 months and see.
Oh my
And
Until
they
they get
having
worse.
unprotected sex with
So that's why I was saying we were making some really bad global decisions back in the. So things have changed. Now you test to treat. Like, so the moment you come back as HIV positive, you're on ARVs the next day,
Yeah.
not waiting for you to get really sick. So I think we've made huge leaps and
Huge,
bounds.
yeah.
I mean, just thinking back to those stories, now I'm like, what
Yeah.
were we thinking?
When you get there, you're like,
What were we
But you're denying people ARVs. What are you saying?
How are you denying? It's a whole story.
It is literally like denying a diabetic their medicine
Insulin,
as well,
exactly.
their
Yeah.
insulin. It doesn't make
Or
any
it's,
sense.
or it's like, let's wait until your sugars get really, really bad.
Let's wait
Then
until
we
you pass
give it to
out
you.
Yeah, and
until
then
you go
we'll
into
start treatment.
shock, and then we'll give
Now
you,
we'll know it's
your
serious.
insulin. Yeah, like,
Yeah.
We have come a long way.
Yeah.
And I also think we've come a long way, and I'd like to give you your flowers as well. I think we've come a long way in terms of the braveness of people. So you were talking about
yes.
this activist that is outside
Yeah.
Parliament and all that kind of stuff. But I also want to say that being on TikTok and
Yeah.
creating content and standing in your status and standing on business and being honest about it, like I'm getting chills speaking about it because genuinely, I don't know how often you hear this. It's incredibly inspirational and so important. We cannot understate how important it is that people own it and show that there's no shame. There's no shame in this. We can have this conversation. And if there's shame attached to it, that we can speak about it. Let's speak about the shame. Let's speak about how my mental health is affected by my status. And opening up my TikTok and seeing someone like you on TikTok owning it and speaking about it and speaking so candidly and sincerely and in a way that I can understand as well is like, it's immeasurable how much it is changing our perceptions on it. And all it takes is one 14-year-old or 15-year-old to see a video of yours on TikTok and genuinely have a lasting impact on someone. You probably don't even realize how many people's lives you've literally affected in like such a positive way. So like I also want to give you your flowers for taking that like bold choice and standing in it and being like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna
Let's
talk about
do
this.
it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna talk about this on social media. I'm gonna talk about this on social media. And similarly, you don't shy away from difficult conversations. You do it in a humorous way. And I think you definitely are super, super relatable. But you also will go on TikTok live and speak about things like sexual health. And I think it takes an incredible amount of maturity as well, far beyond your years, maturity, to go on social media and to put yourself out there, because we know the internet can
a
be
toxic
beautiful.
space,
It can
right?
be amazing, right? You can find your community on TikTok. You can find some beautiful people, friends on TikTok, people that will support you. But you can also find people that are terrible and are horrific, who will say the most disgusting things to you that you have never in your entire life. So putting yourself out there, you're also allowing yourself to be abused.
To be abused.
Basically,
You still
yeah.
get other people who say, why are you talking about HIV? Are you also infected?
Oh,
Yes.
they put you in that box.
Yes, they're like,
Oh
are you
my
also
goodness.
infected? Because also my content was more on humor the whole time. And I was like, oh, let's do something different.
Let's do something real.
You know?
Yeah.
And then we started the HIV conversation, and they're like, you recently started this. Are you also?
Are you coming out?
Are you telling us that you're HIV positive? And I'm like, or they would want you, for them to believe you, they would want you to wear a stethoscope, play that TikTok doctor.
Let's
and say,
pretend.
Yes.
You know, like we can literally, I can buy a stethoscope. It's not that hard.
It's
Do
like
they
35 rand a
understand?
discount.
You don't only get a stethoscope when you graduate from
med school.
med school.
No.
It's like
you
you're a
can-
knight and you get a sword.
Yeah,
right?
like
It's not-
here's your stethoscope. You can literally go buy one at the shops. It's not expensive.
Oh,
Like,
people will rather believe someone who's wearing a stethoscope on TikTok.
That's
Perception.
crazy.
We
We go through the
have a
most
lot.
common.
Yeah, the comment
to go.
section of the DMs must be rough for you guys.
Yeah, comment section is a lot all the time. People are saying things, others. So we were talking also about how it is important, because I was advising them that it is important whether you're in marriage or not. Take PrEP and condomize. Yes, you might believe your partner. The only time that you might believe your partner is when you all get your results and then they are negative there.
Yeah,
but
can I
immediately
go?
when you
Yeah.
leave the room, you don't have to trust them anymore.
those
Protect
results
yourself.
are gone now.
Yeah.
As soon as you part ways, those results are invalid.
Even with the results, I know that there's other couples and relationships where if you test, you've tested for the
For
both.
us.
Yeah, you've
Yes.
tested for the both of us.
Yes,
So
people
it-
do that.
shocked.
It happens. If
Stephanie,
you
you're
test-
okay. I'm okay.
Yeah, I don't need to test.
That
It
is
happens.
wild.
And
to
usually
me.
guys are the ones who do that. As long
Yeah.
as you are healthy, I'm
Yes.
I'm
healthy.
healthy as well. Yeah.
Or they would say, I'm circumcised. So circumcised people
Oh,
who are
I'm
from
not-
the mountain
I'm not going
don't
to
get
get
HIV.
I'm not going to get it.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm both shocked and horrified, right?
That happens. If you test it, I'm good, man.
I'm
We're
okay.
both good.
I also think that it's important to note that we say that we're not asking people to spend thousands. This is not stuff that costs thousands of rands. If you can save money for Groove on the weekend, I'm so sorry. You can also save money for testing. It's not expensive. You can go
It's
to
like
a clinic.
45 rand, I think, in a
And you can
private facility.
save money for condoms as well. So if you can go to Groove, if you can buy yourself a drink, you can also buy yourself the things to keep yourself safe. Right? I have quite a few friends who are in polyamorous relationships, and before they take on a new partner, they will actually go with the partner to go and get tested, and it's become
Really?
part of being in a
culture.
poly relationship and part of the culture to actually go and get tested, and it's shown almost as a sign of respect. And I think it's so beautiful. There's a niche or a part of society where they've taken something that was once frowned upon and was once taboo and has said, no, this is actually now going to be a sign of, I respect you and I love you and I care about you. I respect you as a human being. I care about your health. So I actually am doing this as a sign of
Respect.
my care for you and my respect for you. Let's go get tested together, which I think is a beautiful thing. So I think let's finish it off with some final thoughts about how we see the way forward and where we're hoping we're going to go as a country, but not just as a country, because South Africa doesn't just exist in
isolation.
in
Isolation,
isolation, in like
yeah.
a vacuum. We exist in a globe, and especially because we exist on the internet, the global community also still has an effect on us. A lot of the TV series and the movies we watch are American. I'm not shy to admit that most of the content I consume is American content or foreign content, at least on all of the streaming platforms and things like that. So yes, we have a problem as South Africa, but we also have a problem as an
Globally.
earth, as a globe. So like, where are you hoping that we go with this?
Oh man, let me see. About 10 years from now,
Yeah.
I hope the conversation is just there's some growth in it, you know.
Yeah.
I hope there's growth in ARVs because there's now injectable ones
Yeah,
coming.
these vaccines that are,
I
there's so much
hope-
R&D
That's
happening
amazing.
on the back end.
Because I know
right?
with injectable
Amazing.
ones, if they inject you, then you
Yes.
get to come back in the next
Like
3
3
months.
months,
That
right?
would be
Yeah.
amazing.
That is
That would
amazing.
be amazing. I hope that gets improved. I hope there's less stigma around HIV.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
fingers crossed.
yes.
I just hope a lot. Meaning there's more testing, there's more of a conversation. I just hope a lot in the next 10. I hope this campaign Forever Winner, which is an amazing. I'm just grateful to be part of
Yes,
this.
of course.
I
Yeah.
hope it really helps people. Even 10 years from now, I hope we meet our target, man.
I like that. I
Yeah.
like that.
Adding on what you're saying, I
Yeah.
hope we take the conversation to high schools as well.
Yeah, I agree.
To schools and say,
Yeah.
let's challenge stigma. Let's
Let's
debunk so many
yeah.
myths. There are so many myths around HIV. Let's have this kind of conversation with our kids. And we use our social media platforms to say to people, there are people who are living with HIV that are the same as you. There are people that live with
Yeah.
HIV that are doing amazing things out
Oh, they're
there.
incredibly successful.
And you can still be an activist without you being HIV positive.
Yeah,
100%.
You know, so I think going forward, let's get more people tested. Let's get more of the conversation in our households. And yeah,
Because it reminds me of the activism from back in the 80s and the 70s when it came to the LGBTQIA plus community as well, that a lot of people who were activists who weren't part of the community were then asked, oh, you're an activist for queer people. Are you yourself gay?
Are you queer? Yeah.
No, you can be an activist. You can be speaking on a subject. You can be a supporter. You can be an ally and not be part of that necessarily. It's all important, and it is important to have allies. It is important to have people fighting on behalf of you as well, because the conversation needs to be more than just the people that are affected by it.
Yes.
It needs to be a global conversation. It needs to be more sweeping. I also hope that like our family units and the way adults relate to children changes a little bit. And that I can only speak on in South Africa. I don't know what that's like in other countries. I've never lived anywhere else. I am South African. My parents are South African. My grandparents are South African. I have no idea what goes on in any other countries. I'm so far removed from that. But I know that coming from a very conservative family where you don't speak about those things. My parents didn't speak about those things. My mom found out about sex the first night she got home after she got married. Yeah. And that was when she found out what sex was and how it worked. And that was incredibly traumatic. She's at the aisle 1 minute in the church saying, I do. And the next minute she's in the bed and she's like, what's
going on?
What's happening right now?
Been a day.
What do I do? Like,
It's been a
this
day.
is insane. Like a few years ago, I was just a girl in a small town in the middle of like Mpumalanga. Now all of a sudden, like this is happening to me.
It's a lot.
So like there's a lot in South Africa culturally that I think also needs to change. The conversations we do need to have in the high schools. We also need to talk to their parents and say, we can't be perpetuating these very, very harmful ways that families relate to each other, especially when it comes to sex. We can't be letting our young people find out about sex when they have sex for the first time. That your sexual education should not be the first time you get naked. Your sexual education should have started years before.
Years before
Because
that.
I'll tell you a little secret. You cannot consent to sex if you don't actually know what it is.
100%.
It's not consensual. You cannot consent to engaging in sexual behavior if you don't know what sexual activities
sexual
are
activities
even to
are.
start with. You don't know what you're consenting to. So I'm also hoping that those relationships change and the way we relate within our family units changes. Because it's great to educate a 13-year-old or an 11-year-old or a 9-year-old. It's another thing to ask them to go home and to then educate their parents? To stand up to their parents, to go, no, this is not how it works, or take me to the clinic. I want to go and get tested. Like, we all have South African parents. We know how that conversation is going to go. We know how it goes. So I think a lot has to change. And my hope is in the next 10 years that the generation that becomes parents has had some kind of a conversation and has maybe seen your TikTok and like in the next 10 years is going to become a parent and goes, you know what? I'm going to speak to my child a little bit different. Like my generation is like, I'm in that generation now where my friends are starting to think about having kids and they're like thinking about it and they're like planning it and like maybe people are getting married and it's like, I know that my friends are going to speak to their children differently than what our parents spoke to us. So like my hope is that, attitudes change.
100%.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, we've come a long way in 20 years.
We have. We've come a long way in 10 years,
Yeah,
even medically
exactly.
speaking.
We've come a long
So
way.
what are your hopes for the future? And I think you can maybe give us a little bit of hope, especially when it comes to medicine.
There's great stuff in the pipeline. So there's
amazing.
there's injectable antiretrovirals that will improve compliance.
Okay.
There's vaccine trials, which is also, I think we've come out of an era now post-COVID where we don't trust injections or medicine. I just want to say, trust the science, follow the science. These guys know what they're talking about.
And this is something that they've been working on it for years. This is not like a new, like they just rushed a quick vaccine in the last year. They've been working on this since the 70s.
Exactly.
literally.
So trust the science.
Yeah.
It's doing wonders.
And your hope for just families in the future and
That would
education?
change, that would definitely change the conversation. And that's why I'm so proud to be involved with this. I think these are landmark campaigns that change the trajectory of generations. And I think we continue to do this and we'll do well.
I hope that this conversation even serves as something that we can look back on in 10 years' time and look back on us now and be like, wow, we really had those conversations and like so much has changed. And the way we are speaking about things, I hope in 10 years from now, people are like, wow, like these were things that they were struggling with 10 years ago. That's crazy. Like, that's so insane. So thank you so much for joining me today on 5 Unscripted.
for
I
having
appreciate
us.
it. And y'all are all doing amazing work in your respective field. I am going to consume as much content as I can from both of you online. I love it. Y'all are both beautiful and funny in your own way as well. And thank you so much for joining us. And Dr. Donny, once again, thank you so much for having a very open and honest conversation. And as a medical doctor, speaking in a way that is accessible to someone who doesn't have a medical degree. I know you're studying to be a doctor, but for
We
the
are going
two of
that
us,
route.
we appreciate.
Thank you.
We appreciate you using accessible,
Language.
words and language. I appreciate
Yeah.
that. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Yay. Yay.
This is 5FM.